It was one of those nights in the city, the kind where the rain isn't really rain, but a thick, cold mist that clings to the streetlights and turns the wet asphalt into a mirror of neon regrets. My shift was nearly over. I'd been driving for 35 years, first the yellow cab, now this digital chariot, and 35 years teaches you the rhythm of the city's breath, when it exhales the drunks, when it sighs the weary commuters, and when it whispers the truly broken. This particular night felt like a whisper. My phone chimed, rattling on the mount. A pickup on the Upper East Side, a fancy block I usually avoid. The destination was far, deep into Queens, a neighborhood known more for quiet family life than late-night drama. A long haul, which was fine by me. I needed the fare, and honestly, after a day of small talk and hurried goodbyes, the solitude of a long drive was a welcome companion. I pulled up to a magnificent brownstone, the kind of place where the rent for 1 month could buy my car twice over. The light spilled from a massive arched window, illuminating the stoop. I waited, keeping the meter dark and the engine idling smoothly. An old habit. It's always respectful to wait for the passenger. Let them come to you. The front door opened and out stepped her. She wasn't carrying luggage. No oversized designer tote. Just a small, worn leather shoulder bag that looked like it had seen more travels than the rest of her attire suggested. Her dress was elegant, a soft sapphire blue that caught the muted city light, and her hair was pulled back loosely, framing a face that was strikingly beautiful, but not in the harsh, sharp way of the young socialites I usually picked up here. Hers was a soft beauty touched by a knowledge of the world, perhaps a little weariness, yet paradoxically a kind of radiant peace. She looked about my age, maybe a little younger, which is rare for a late-night fare. Usually it's the kids. She paused on the steps, taking a deep, almost reverent breath of the damp city air, as if tasting it for the very first time, or perhaps for the very last. That's when the first small, almost imperceptible knot of unease tightened in my chest. It was the way she looked at the street, at the parked cars, at the little potted trees, not with the hurried indifference of a person going somewhere, but with the quiet contemplation of someone leaving something behind. She descended the steps slowly, her heels clicking a precise, measured rhythm on the stone. When she reached my cab, she didn't rush in. She opened the rear door with care, slid onto the seat, and closed the door with a gentle thud that felt conclusive. "Queens," I stated, just confirming the address displayed on my screen. "A long way out." Her voice was low, melodic, and carried a trace of an accent I couldn't quite place. Something European, perhaps. Refined, but not pretentious. "Yes, a very long way. Thank you." She didn't elaborate, didn't check her phone, didn't fidget with the seatbelt or her bag. She simply settled back, her hands folded neatly in her lap, and stared out the window. Now, in my line of work, silence is often a gift. Most passengers treat you like a moving, invisible piece of furniture, and I prefer it that way. But her silence was different. It wasn't the silence of someone lost in thought or busy on a call. It was a weighted silence, the kind that holds a story on the tip of its tongue, waiting for the right moment or the right ears to spill out. It felt less like a lack of conversation and more like a preparatory quiet before a confession. I pulled away from the curb, the tires swishing softly on the wet pavement. We drove south for several minutes, passing the grand museums and the elegant apartment buildings. The city was quieting down, the traffic thinning. The atmosphere in the car was thick, almost tangible. I kept glancing up at the rearview mirror, catching fragments of her reflection. She wasn't watching the city rush by. She was watching her own reflection, or perhaps the light in her eyes. There was a faint smile playing on her lips, a smile that seemed to understand a secret the rest of the world hadn't quite grasped. Finally, as we merged onto the highway, the long, straight road ahead, illuminated only by my headlights, she spoke, her voice cutting through the hum of the engine, soft as silk, yet commanding attention. "Old man," she began, the casual address not sounding disrespectful but almost intimate. "Tell me something. Do you believe in fate?" The question wasn't trivial. It was an anchor dropped into the calm water of the night. I gripped the steering wheel a little tighter. Fate. It's a word that sounds too grand for the practical life of a taxi driver. We deal in probabilities, traffic patterns, and the sheer randomness of where the next fare takes us. But I had to admit there are moments, those near misses, those chance encounters, those addresses that seem to pull you out of your orbit, where the word coincidence feels thin and insufficient. I took a moment, letting the question hang in the air, allowing the highway miles to eat away at the distance between the life she was leaving and the destination she was seeking. "Ma'am," I replied, keeping my voice steady and professional, "I've been driving this city for decades. I've seen things no priest, no cop, and no therapist has ever seen. I've had pregnant women deliver babies in my back seat. I've driven men to funerals and weddings on the same day. I've picked up lottery winners minutes after they won, and men who've just lost everything. If all of that is just random chance, then life is far too sloppy to be beautiful. So, yes, I suppose I believe in a script. Maybe not a grand design, but definitely a script that brings the right people together for the right scene at the right time." I looked up again. Her smile widened, just a fraction, but enough to warm the cold space between us. It was a smile of affirmation, of understanding. "A script," she echoed softly. "That's a beautiful way to put it. And you, my friend, are definitely in my final scene." The use of the word final sent a chill down my spine that had nothing to do with the temperature of the cab. It was a statement of profound gravity, delivered with the lightest, most charming tone. It was the moment I realized this was not going to be a simple, routine fare. The gravity in the car had just doubled. My professional demeanor, the one that shields me from the dramas I ferry across the city, began to crack. There was something in her eyes, a kind of resigned certainty, that demanded I stop being merely a driver and start being a witness. I had to maintain the professionalism, the neutrality that keeps me sane. "Ma'am," I said, my voice now a little softer, betraying my unease. "Are you all right? Is everything okay?" She turned her head fully and met my eyes in the rearview mirror. Her gaze was direct, unwavering, and intensely personal. "Everything," she said, her voice dropping to a near whisper, "is exactly as it should be. More than all right, driver. I am content, and I have something I need to tell you, something that perhaps you should hear." She adjusted herself, taking a deep, slow breath that seemed to gather all the courage and memory within her. The air in the cab thrummed with unspoken emotion. This was the opening of the confession, the moment the story takes over and the driver becomes the confessor. The emotional trigger was now set. The sudden, unexpected announcement of a finality, wrapped in a blanket of serenity, forcing the narrator and the listener to confront the profound weight of the passenger's journey. The silence that followed was heavy with anticipation, the quiet space before a life's curtain call. The highway signs flashed past, each one counting down the distance to a destination that was starting to feel less like an address and more like the end of a very long sentence. I knew I had to listen, not just because it was my job, but because, as she said, I was in her final scene. My pulse picked up speed, matching the rhythm of the tires on the asphalt. I swallowed hard, the years of driving vanishing, leaving only the man who had just been asked to bear witness. "I'm listening," I said simply, the 3 words an open invitation for her to unload the burden she carried with such elegant composure. The long road stretched before us, empty and beckoning, ready to receive her story. The rain outside intensified slightly, a gentle drumming accompaniment to the unfolding drama. I kept my eyes on the road, but my attention was locked on her reflection. She took another breath, a deep, cleansing one, like someone shedding a heavy cloak. The silence was over. The story had begun. "It started, as these things always do, with a misunderstanding," she began, her voice gaining strength, shifting from the soft, melodic tone of a philosopher to the clear, precise cadence of a memoirist. "My name is Alara, or it was. When I came to this country 30 years ago, I didn't come with dreams of skyscrapers or riches. I came for a library, a specific, quiet, dusty library tucked away in a small corner of Boston. I was a scholar of ancient languages. My obsession was with the forgotten dialects of the Mediterranean, the words the empires thought they had silenced. Most people, they chase the noise of the world. I chased the echoes." She paused, and I could hear the faint echo of her past in that brief silence. I didn't interrupt. The best thing a driver can do in moments like these is to simply be a vessel, a mobile confessional booth moving anonymously through the night. I found myself driving a little slower, a little smoother, wanting to prolong the moment, afraid of what might come next, but utterly compelled to hear it. In that library, I wasn't just reading dead languages. I was searching for the living voice of my ancestor, Elara continued. My family, back in the old country, had a history tied to a terrible, unjust land dispute, a historical wrong that cost us everything, including our name and our physical legacy. The family legend claimed that the true deed, the indisputable proof of ownership, was encoded in a series of ancient cryptic texts that had been secretly brought to America generations ago. Everyone in the family believed it was just a fairy tale to comfort ourselves after the loss. But I, the scholar, saw the pattern where others saw only myth. I knew the document existed, hidden in plain sight, encoded in a dialect only 3 people on Earth could still read, and 2 of those were dead. The emotional hook was pulling tighter now, a quest for justice and a lost legacy, tied to the arcane world of ancient scholarship. The weight of family history settled into the back seat alongside her. I spent 5 years in that library, 5 years of solitude, fueled by bad coffee and the burning conviction that I was close. And then, one rainy Tuesday, identical to this one, I found it. Not the deed itself, but the key. A single, brittle papyrus fragment tucked inside the binding of a 17th century religious tract. It contained the final cipher. I worked for 48 hours straight, barely sleeping, translating, cross-referencing, piecing together the linguistic puzzle. When I finished, I didn't have a grand, glorious moment of victory. I had a profound, quiet moment of absolute certainty. The document, the original deed, was not in the library. It was in the possession of the descendants of the man who had stolen the land from my family, a powerful, ruthless man whose family name still commanded fear and influence both here and abroad. This revelation added a thrilling layer of danger and conflict to her serene disposition. She was not just a scholar, she was a detective, a revenger of history. The family, the Dracos family, I will call them that, were rich, politically connected, and guarded their assets like dragons. Their power extended into every corner of the city. To simply walk up and present the deciphered papyrus would have been foolish. It would have disappeared, and I along with it. I had to infiltrate. I had to become part of the scenery. I had to get close to the object itself, which I discovered was kept, not in a bank vault, but in their private residence, treated as an irrelevant antique, a cruel irony. She gestured vaguely towards the exclusive neighborhood we had just left. That residence, the brownstone, the one where you picked me up. For the last 2 years I have lived there, not as a guest, of course. That would be impossible. I became a librarian, a private curator. They hired me, unknowingly, to catalog and manage their enormous collection of rare books and artifacts. It was the perfect cover. I was invisible, the quiet, aging academic who handled their precious possessions with reverent care. No one suspected that the quiet cataloger was the key to their entire ill-gotten fortune. I felt a surge of adrenaline, a strange mixture of admiration and fear for this elegant woman in my back seat. She had lived a double life, right under the noses of the city's elite. The emotional toll of living in the house of your enemy, handling objects purchased with your family's generational suffering, is something I cannot easily describe. Every morning I would wake up and feel the weight of their stolen prosperity pressing down on me. I smiled, I nodded, I served tea, and all the while I was systematically mapping the house, the security, the schedule of every single occupant. I spent my days reading their history and my nights plotting its correction. The true deed was kept locked in a fireproof safe disguised as a display case for Roman coins in the patriarch's private study. I had the combination, of course. Deciphering the language was the hard part. Breaking a simple code was child's play. She laughed, a short, dry, almost musical sound that held no joy, only satisfaction. I've been asked if I felt guilty for the deception, for the years of silence, and the answer is no. Guilt is for those who take without justification. I was retrieving what was rightfully ours. My duty to my ancestors outweighed any modern sense of decorum or honesty. My integrity was tied to the soil of my homeland, not the manners of a New York high society drawing room. We were deep in the tunnel now, the artificial lights flashing rhythmically through the cab, momentarily breaking the connection in the mirror. When we emerged, the highway opened up again, and the lights of Queens began to beckon in the distance. "Tonight," Ilara stated, her voice quiet but firm, bringing the narrative back to the present moment, was the night. They were hosting a large charity gala. Hundreds of people, security distracted by the chaos, the patriarch preoccupied with donors. I slipped away just after midnight. I went to the study, unlocked the safe. The lock sounded a tiny, almost apologetic click, and I took the deed. "It's here." She tapped the small leather bag in her lap. 30 years of work, of exile, of quiet, academic suffering, culminating in 5 silent minutes of action. I walked out the front door, hailed your cab, and here we are. The deed is secured. The injustice is overturned. The script, driver, is complete. Her statement of closure brought a powerful, almost religious sense of peace into the vehicle. The relief she felt was palpable, washing over the lingering tension of the stealth and danger. The emotional flow had peaked with the satisfaction of successful retrieval and was now settling into a profound release and certainty. The narrative had moved from historical quest to dangerous espionage and now arrived at triumphant escape. I realized I was holding my breath. I let it out slowly. "And the Draco's family, they don't know yet." "Not yet," she confirmed, a soft, predatory edge to her smile. "But they will, very soon. And when they do, they will discover that the quiet librarian, the old woman they overlooked, has rearranged their world entirely. But by then, I will be gone." The road ahead was clear, the silence rich with the implication of her impending disappearance. She had achieved her mission. And now, the question remained, where does a ghost go when their haunting is done? The highway gave way to the smaller, more intricate streets of Queens, and the noise of the city transformed into the muffled sounds of a sleeping suburb. The destination address was on a quiet, tree-lined avenue, the houses solid but modest, a world away from the gilded cages of the Upper East Side. I felt the need to speak, to anchor myself in the practical reality of the moment before her story consumed me entirely. "Ilara," I said, using her name for the first time, careful to keep my tone neutral. "What happens now? With the deed, I mean. Will you turn it over to the authorities? Will you go back home?" She sighed, a long, weary sound that finally betrayed the decades of stress she had carried. The momentary thrill of victory seemed to ebb away, leaving behind the exhaustion of a marathon runner who has just crossed the finish line. "I won't be dealing with the authorities, driver. The law, in my experience, is a tool wielded by the powerful, not a shield for the righteous. My family's history taught me that lesson brutally. No, the deed is on its way to my nephew, a young lawyer still tied to the old country, a man who still believes in fighting these battles through the courts. He has the political contacts and the legal ruthlessness to take on the Draco's family now that he has the physical evidence. He will use it to restore the land, to rebuild the legacy. My part in the script is strictly the retrieval. The emotional climax, perhaps, but not the long, dry denouement." She shifted slightly, pulling the small leather bag closer to her chest, as if warming herself with its presence. "As for going back home, I suppose in a way that's exactly what I'm doing, but not in the way you mean." The second wave of unease hit me then, a more powerful emotional trigger than the first. Her serenity, which had seemed like the calm of a victorious warrior, now took on the unsettling quality of a final, complete peace. The peace of someone who has tied up all their loose ends. It was too quiet, too resolved. Her lack of future plans was jarring. Most people, having just pulled off a lifetime's heist, would be buzzing with adrenaline and anticipation for the next step. She was simply finished. "You're telling me this story," I observed, my professional distance completely abandoned now. "You're telling a complete stranger, a hired driver, the intimate details of a decades-long vendetta, risking exposure, putting me in the position of knowing a secret that could easily get me into serious trouble. Why? Why me?" And why now? Her eyes, when they met mine in the mirror, were genuinely kind. There was a gentle, almost maternal look in them. Because, old man, you are the last listener I need, and because of the fate we talked about. Your presence is the universe's confirmation that my story matters, that it won't simply vanish into the night. Think of it as a final spoken testament. Every great endeavor requires a witness, someone detached yet attentive, someone who can carry the memory forward, not as a participant, but as a chronicler. She smiled again, but this time the smile was tinged with genuine melancholy, creating a complex emotional layer. The sadness of necessary goodbyes, overlaid with the warmth of shared intimacy. The truth is, driver, the last 5 years of my life were focused solely on that safe. I lived like a ghost, dedicated only to the past. The moment I closed that safe door and turned the lock back, the mission was over. The purpose that tethered me to this world, to the grind of waking up every day and wearing a mask, vanished. And I discovered something rather profoundly simple and sad. My engine is empty. The fuel, the rage, the dedication, it's all gone. There's nothing left to power the next phase of life. She reached into her small bag, not for money, but for something wrapped in tissue paper. She handled it with the same reverence she handled the antique books. It was a photograph, old and slightly faded. "This is my husband, Andreas," she whispered, her voice cracking with the first genuine display of vulnerable emotion I had witnessed. He was the one who was supposed to retrieve the deed. We were young scholars, fierce idealists, and we were coming here together. We were traveling to America when he got sick, a sudden aggressive illness that gave us 6 weeks, not 60 years. He died right as we were boarding the plane. I carried his mission, his dream, across the ocean with me. The anger I needed to sustain the decades of waiting, that wasn't mine. It was his loss, his unfulfilled destiny that I adopted. She held the photograph up, and I risked a quick glance. He looked just as fierce and idealistic as she described. It was a picture of 2 people madly in love, poised on the edge of a great adventure. "And for 30 years, Alara continued, her voice now a low, rich stream of confession, "I have been living his life, completing his task. I have not lived my own life. I haven't grieved him. I haven't loved again. I haven't done anything that wasn't in service of this deed. I became a machine, running on someone else's grief and purpose. Tonight, I finished the assignment. And now, the machine needs to be shut down." The emotional intensity was peaking dramatically here. This was no mere caper story. It was a decades-long self-sacrifice driven by deep love and adopted purpose. The sense of finality now felt truly ominous, rooted in the depletion of her very soul. The physical deed is gone, and the emotional deed is signed, sealed, and delivered. The truth is, driver, I'm tired. Profoundly tired. I don't want to start over. I don't want to find a new purpose. All I want is to rest. To finally be Alara, the woman who loved Andreas. Not Alara, the avenging scholar. We turned onto her street. The air, which had been thick with tension, now vibrated with her profound weariness. I knew with a sinking certainty that I was not just taking her to a house. I was taking her to the end of a very long road, one she had chosen to terminate. The realization of her profound exhaustion and ultimate intention settled heavily into the cab, replacing the adrenaline of the chase with a quiet dread. I knew, with the certainty that only comes from decades of observing human despair, exactly what she meant by shutting down the machine. I was now driving a woman to her final self-chosen resting place. We pulled up slowly to the curb in front of a small, neat house. It wasn't remarkable, just one of many, but the front yard was meticulously cared for, blooming even in the damp night air. There was a single light on in the front window, a warm, soft glow that felt welcoming, almost waiting. I put the car in park, but left the engine running. The mechanical hum felt like a necessary connection to the living, mundane world. "Alara," I said, turning slightly in my seat, addressing her directly without the filter of the mirror. The moment required sincerity, not professionalism. "You can't. You've won. You've done the impossible. You have the right to claim the victory. to start a new chapter, to grieve Andreas properly, to live for yourself. She shook her head gently, her expression still serenely resolved, though her eyes were glistening in the cab's dim light. The emotional arc was now one of pleading intervention from the driver, meeting the passenger's unwavering, yet tender, resignation. "Driver, I appreciate your concern, truly. But imagine living with a single, consuming goal for 30 years. Every meal, every interaction, every sleep cycle was a tactic to serve that one objective. The Alara that existed before Andreas's death, the carefree scholar, the eager bride, that woman is gone. The one who remained is a vessel, a tool of justice. Tools do not seek new careers. They seek the drawer when the work is done." She opened the small bag again, extracting the deed. It was a thick, rolled parchment, tied with a heavy, gold-colored ribbon. It looked ancient and fragile, yet carried the weight of generations. She held it for a moment, pressing it to her cheek, a final, tangible connection to her purpose. "The deed will be mailed first thing tomorrow morning from this address, to my nephew in Greece. I've already prepared the secure, watermarked packaging and the courier forms. It only needs the final drop-off. My mission, my physical role, ends tonight." Then, she reached into the bag and pulled out a thick envelope, plain white, sealed with a wax stamp, the same kind of seal that had secured the deed. "This is for you," she said, offering it across the seat divider. "Don't open it until I'm gone. It is not just payment for the fare. It is a reward for your presence and your silence. More importantly, it contains a letter, a full narrative of the events, signed and dated, with copies of the initial research, a detailed, irrefutable account. Should the Draco's family decide to retaliate against the messenger, against my nephew, or if they try to discredit the deed, you will have the evidence. You are not just a witness to my confession, driver. You are the second pillar of my defense. You are the safety net." I hesitated, reluctant to touch the envelope. Accepting it felt like accepting her decision, like becoming complicit in her final act. But refusing it felt selfish, denying the critical role she had just assigned me, the role of the chronicler, the safeguard of the truth. "They will come looking for me," she stated, noticing my hesitation. "When they discover the deed is gone and the librarian is missing, they will be methodical. They won't immediately think I've vanished. They will assume I've escaped. They will track this cab ride. They might track you. That's why you must have this. This is your protection." That shifted the emotional trigger from dread to self-preservation and high-stakes consequence. Now, I was not just an audience, I was a marked man, drawn into a dangerous international vendetta. The stakes had been raised exponentially. I took the envelope. It was heavy, packed tight with paper. It felt like holding a history book or perhaps a burden. "What is this place, Alara?" I asked, looking at the small, glowing house. "Who is here?" "No one," she replied, her voice soft. "I bought it 2 months ago under a shell corporation preparing for this night. It's furnished simply. It's quiet. It's mine. It is the place where Alara, the woman, can finally rest. It's the place where the machine stops." She placed the deed on the seat beside her, her hands now empty, resting calmly in her lap. The contrast between the monumental historical document and the stillness of the woman who held it was stark and painful. "Tell me something, driver," she asked, turning the conversation back to me, the tone shifting again, this time to one of gentle curiosity and final human connection. "You've seen so much life pass through your car. What did you learn about people?" "Really learn?" I paused, thinking about the thousands of faces, the fragments of joy, sorrow, and desperation I had collected over the years. "I learned that everyone is always going somewhere, even when they don't know the address," I said, the philosophical gravity surprising even myself. "And I learned that every ride, no matter how short, is a connection, a moment where 2 lives overlap, and sometimes one leaves a permanent mark on the other." She smiled, a truly beautiful, unburdened smile this time. "Then my final connection was perfect. Thank you for the ride and for the listening. Now please, the script requires a final farewell." She reached for the door handle. I had one last desperate thought, one final appeal that transcended mere logic. "If you are resting, Alara," I said quickly, urgently, Then rest here. Rest and heal. You can still send the deed. You can still be free. Don't let your mission be your coffin." She paused, her hand hovering over the door latch. She looked back at me, her eyes deep and ancient. "The greatest peace is not found in a new beginning, old man, but in a complete ending. And I have chosen mine. It is final, but it is free." She opened the door, and the interior light flickered on, starkly illuminating the elegant blue dress and the quiet resolve on her face. The cold, damp air of the early morning rushed into the car, carrying the scent of wet earth and distant jasmine. This was it, the irreversible moment of transition. She stepped out, her movements slow, deliberate, and entirely graceful. The deed, wrapped in its ribbon, remained on the back seat, already severed from its owner, ready for its journey to Greece. She closed the car door softly, that same conclusive thud from the beginning. Only this time, it sounded like the final chime of a clock. I watched her in the side mirror. She paused for a moment on the curb, looking not at the house but back at my car. It was a fleeting, final acknowledgement of the role I'd played. Then, she turned toward the small, illuminated house. As she walked up the short path, I noticed a detail I had missed before. She was walking with a slight limp, a stiffness that spoke not of an old injury, but of deep, constant physical tension finally released. The weight of the world and 3 decades of deception seemed to fall off her shoulders with every measured step she took toward the door. The emotional trigger here was the subtle final display of physical vulnerability after the psychological strength, intensifying the feeling of imminent, fragile farewell. She reached the door, pulled a key from her small leather bag, and let herself in. The single light inside grew slightly brighter as she entered, then stabilized. She did not look back. I sat there, engine idling, the sound filling the heavy silence. I couldn't drive away. Not yet. The ethical dilemma of the situation, the moral pull to intervene versus the respect for her autonomous, seemingly peaceful choice, held me hostage in the driver's seat. I was a professional driver, yet I was now the guardian of a woman's final act, holding her confession and her protection in a single envelope on the passenger seat. I gave it 5 minutes, long, suffocating minutes, where the only sounds were the ticking of the engine and the beating of my own heart. I kept waiting for a sign, a flickering light, a movement at the window, anything that suggested a preparation for life, not an abandonment of it. But the house remained still, quiet, and profoundly final. It exuded the deep, settled peace of a structure that has received its only intended occupant. Finally, I reached over and picked up the envelope she had given me. It felt warm from her hand. The wax seal was intricate and ancient-looking. I ran my thumb over the thick paper, sensing the historical weight of its contents. This was my proof, my burden, and my fare. I had to secure the mission she had tasked me with. I had to ensure the deed reached its next destination. I gently moved the rolled parchment from the seat. It was cold to the touch. I found a secure, discreet place for the deed inside my glove compartment, a place where only I would look. Then I pulled the cab away from the curb, driving away slowly, quietly, not wanting to disturb the fragile stillness she had created for herself. The emotional trajectory was now one of the driver's acceptance of his new, solemn responsibility, mixed with lingering, helpless grief. I drove around the block, slowly, carefully, my eyes darting to the rearview mirror. I watched the house disappear behind the curtain of the trees. I had to perform the final, practical step of her plan. I drove to the nearest mailbox, a large blue receptacle gleaming under a street lamp 3 blocks away. I took the deed from the glove compartment and dropped it through the slot. The heavy thump as it landed inside resonated like a distant gunshot in the quiet street. The final action was taken. The deed was on its way to her nephew. With the mission complete, the weight in the car should have lessened. Instead, it intensified. I was now alone with the story, the silence, and the heavy envelope. I continued driving through the quiet streets, letting the distance grow between me and that small house of profound goodbyes. I needed to process. I needed to know the true extent of what I'd been a part of. I pulled over onto a deserted side road near a small park, killed the engine, and finally ripped open the wax seal. The scent of aged paper and something faintly floral, perhaps the perfume she wore or the scent of the brownstone library, wafted out. Inside, there was a stack of documents and a neatly folded typewritten letter. The first thing I saw was the cash, a large wad of $100 bills, far, far more than any fare, enough to cover my monthly expenses twice over. It was her payment for my silence and my role, but it was the letter that commanded my immediate attention. I held it up to the pale glow of the street lamp, my old eyes straining to read her elegant script. It began, "My dear driver, my final confessor." I unfolded the letter completely, the crinkle of the paper loud in the sudden silence of the cab. Her final words, her last testimony, were right here in my hands. The emotional gravity was at its peak, the ultimate confession and the final resolution, forcing the driver to grapple with the lasting implications of her choice. The letter continued, explaining the full extent of the Dracos family's crimes, detailing not just the theft of the land, but the systemic destruction of her family's name and fortune. It was a history lesson written with the controlled fury of a victim who had dedicated her life to proving the truth. She provided the names of key legal contacts and academics who could corroborate the linguistic analysis, tying every loose thread with scholarly precision. This was her final, devastatingly effective act of war. But then, the letter shifted, moving from the academic and legal to the deeply personal. A final, intimate confession not for posterity, but for me, the man who had driven her to the end. "You asked why you, driver," the letter read, "and I told you about fate and the script. But there is another reason, a more practical and perhaps more honest one. You reminded me so much of my father, not in appearance, but in temperament. The quiet strength, the watchful eyes, the way you handled the silence. You carried the weight of the city without letting it crush your spirit. I needed someone to tell this story to who would see the justice, not just the tragedy. Someone who would understand that the ultimate act of love is sometimes letting go, both of the one you cherished and the mission you carried for them." She went on to detail the final moments of Andreas's life, confirming what I had suspected. The mission had become a substitute for her grief. She couldn't mourn him, because mourning meant acknowledging the end of their shared dream. By completing the mission, she finally gave herself permission to let the dream and the person she had been for 30 years die. "I have chosen a simple, non-violent exit, driver," she wrote, confirming my darkest fears, but doing so with a clinical frankness that somehow softened the blow. "I have left instructions and documents that will ensure this appears to be a natural passing, a final peace after a long illness, which in a way it is. I have taken precautions to ensure no one is implicated, least of all you. You were simply a kind, professional driver who took me to a quiet home after a very long night of work." She stressed again the critical importance of the envelope's contents. "Hold on to this truth, driver. Guard it with the same quiet conviction you guard your route maps. It is a defense, a history, and a piece of my soul. Do not release it unless the Dracos family tries to twist the narrative or threaten the restoration of our family's honor. If that happens, you have my full authority to release the narrative and the evidence to the press, to the international community, and to the authorities. You are the final, fail-safe guardian of my legacy." The pressure this placed on me was immense, but it was also a profound validation of my brief, intense connection with her. I wasn't just a driver. I was her confidant, her executor, her final, human anchor. The final paragraph of the letter was the most deeply moving, dissolving the last remnants of my professional shell. I walked into that house, driver, and I finally took off the scholar's cloak and the warrior's armor. I am Ilara, who loved Andreas, and I am going to rest now. Please, remember this night. Remember the power of truth and the quiet dignity of a well-completed journey. And when you look up at the morning sky, remember the joy of an ending that is finally all your own." The letter was signed simply, Ilara. I sat there for a long time, the only movement the gentle shake of my old hands holding the brittle paper. The sun was just beginning to paint the eastern horizon, a pale, hesitant grey. It was the dawn of a new day, but for Ilara, it was the start of an eternal night. I started the engine. The sound was comforting, a return to the practical rhythm of my life. I carefully tucked the letter and the stack of documents back into the envelope and placed it securely in a hidden compartment under the driver's seat. It was too important to put in the glove compartment with the deed, which was already on its way. This was the deeper secret than necessary protection. I pulled the cab back into the flow of traffic, heading toward the heart of the city, toward the morning rush and the need for coffee. I was an old driver, carrying a new heavy cargo. The confession, the consequence, and the profound quiet memory of a woman who had used her last ride to finish her life's work. The city was waking up, oblivious to the fact that one of its greatest, most silent dramas had just reached its poignant conclusion in the backseat of a humble cab. I would continue to drive. I would listen to the hurried, the joyful, and the drunk. But every time a passenger opened my door, every time I glanced in the rearview mirror, I would remember the serene face of Ilara and the weight of the story she left with me, a silent guardian of a truth more valuable than gold, driving through the city's neon-lit, fragile fate.